Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Jason Ortitay of the 46th District in Allegheny and Washington counties. In order for citizens to trust that their government is open and honest, they must have access to information about that government. This freedom of information brings accountability and prevents abuses of power. In 2008, Pennsylvania took a big step toward a more open government by passing right-to-know laws. Now all records are presumed to be public, putting the burden of proof on government agencies instead of on the citizen to prove it should not be released. In addition, the Office of Open Records was created to implement the law and assist those searching for information. Joining me today to discuss their efforts is the Executive Director of the Office of Open Records, Erik Arneson. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Representative. Very glad to be here.
Good. I'm in the middle of my series of trying to educate the people back home about all the different services the state government has, and with the Office of Open Records, I'm here to learn a lot more about it too, just the people's back home. So just if you could give us a introduction to the Office of Records.
Sure, be very happy to. It's a relatively new office. We don't have a lot of those in state government, which is probably a good thing. But we are one of the few relatively new ones. It was created, officially opened on January 1st of 2009. And what we do, when people want to know what's going on in their government, whether it's their school district, their borough, their township, their county, or even state government, they can request records from any government agency. If they are denied access to those records, then they're able to appeal to us at the Office of Open Records. It's a simple one-page form to fill out. They don't need a lawyer or anything like that. We've made it very, very simple and user-friendly. And they can appeal to us if they're denied records, and then we'll look at the facts of the case, what records were requested, why the agency says they denied access to those records, any other evidence that's relevant to the case. And I have a team of about 12 to 14 attorneys who split up the caseload. They review it, and they make a decision on whether or not the records that had been requested originally are public records and thus should be released to the person who requested them.
Now, does that make up your entire staff, or do you have people around the state, or how does
We're a relatively small staff. The attorneys are the bulk of my staff because that's the biggest part of our responsibility, is to make those decisions. We only have 30 days to make a decision once an appeal comes into our office. I do have several others. We have several administrative staff, of course, and I have one person who's our Director of Training and Outreach, and mostly what he does is travel the state, training mainly government officials on how the right-to-know law works, what they need to know, that sort of thing. He's been out in Western Pennsylvania dozens of times over the past few years. He's traveled all over the state.
So what's an average day in the like of in the office for a typical employee there?
It's, you know what, it's fascinating. When I took this job, the office had already been up and running for more than 6 years. And I was a little worried that maybe every, interesting decision had been made, but that was far from the truth. We get cases involving local police departments and personnel issues there. We get cases involving county government, state government, everything. So there's no typical day really, other than it's very busy. Last year our office received 3,000 appeals. We had about a dozen attorneys last year, so you do the math pretty quickly. You're looking at 280 or so appeals per attorney per year, and again, we only have 30 days to get them out. So other than it being busy, there's really no standard day.
So are you seeing a trend in these requests coming in, or is it kind of been flat over the last, since you've been there?
Sure, yeah, I took over full-time last June, so I've been there about 9 months now, and the trends are, very generally speaking, what we're seeing are more requests directed to local government than state government, more requests made by regular citizens rather than the media. We have seen an uptick in requests made by inmates, which is an interesting thing that we didn't anticipate when this was enacted back in 2008. But generally speaking, the people who use this law are citizens in their communities trying to get information about their school district, their town, or their county.
Now, we touched upon how easy it is to fill out the form. What's the process to get the request to you guys?
Sure. The first step is to make the request to the appropriate agency. So if you want to, for example, know what your township spent on snow plowing this past winter, you can submit that request to the township. We have a form on our website. Again, same thing. It's a one-page form, very simple to fill out. You can use that, submit it to the township.
And most townships have this stuff either posted online or they can get access to this form if they go in
Yes,
to their town.
exactly right. If a government agency has a website, under the law, they're mandated to have information about how to make these requests on their website.
Okay.
And we work with agencies to make sure that they do that. That's not a difficult thing. So you're exactly right. Go to the township website, find the appropriate form. Should be very easy to find, very easy to fill out, make the request. And then if you get the answer, great, you're done, you're finished. If the government agency says, no, you can't have those records, or they redact the records, or they give you some but not all, any of those scenarios, you come to our website, find the appeal form. There's a very simple step-by-step process, and you file that with us within 15 days of getting the response from the agency. And we go from there. And then, as I said, we have 30 days. So it's a relatively quick process from start to finish. The township at the front end, I should say, typically has 7 days, 5 business days to issue a response. There are a number of reasons they can extend that by up to a month, depending on what the request is. But really, start to finish, you should be looking at something in the range of 2 to 3 months in a kind of worst case scenario for most people.
So once you guys get the appeal form, your team goes to work. Now, do you guys go back to the township to inquire, to do investigative work with them, or is it more of just figuring out legally what you guys can and cannot share?
Right. It can go a couple of different ways. Most cases are handled just based on the paperwork that people file with our office. We require the agency has the burden of proof. The law is purposely tilted to favor the requester. So the agency has to prove why they're not releasing the records, that they have a legitimate reason
And
for
it
that.
hasn't always been that way.
It has not. That was probably the single biggest change that this law made back in 2008. And so once we get that, we'll require the agency to provide us affidavits, which are, papers where they're swearing to the facts in those papers under penalty of perjury. So they will attest to the facts of the case. Our lawyers will take a look at it. Sometimes we order in-camera review of records, which means we say to the agency, give us unredacted copies of the records. We look at them in private, we evaluate them, we see what the agency is claiming as far as why they don't have to release these. We actually look at the records and we make a judgment there. And in some cases, not often, but in some cases, we actually have hearings. We went out to Pittsburgh. We had a case involving California Borough. Earlier this year, we were out in Pittsburgh for that hearing. So we'll do that when it's necessary as well.
Now, we've got some legislation that the Senate has passed, is now sent over to the House. It's sitting in one of the committees here in the House. Can you tell the folks back home about that piece of legislation?
Absolutely. Senate Bill 411 is the number. It passed the Senate last year. It's been in the House State Government Committee, where I know they're taking a very active look at it. They had a public hearing on it very recently. It would make a number of changes to the law, the vast majority of which are, again, user-friendly, improving some of the process at the Office of Open Records, all to make it easier for requesters. It also takes a look at the fact that some agencies, remember this law applies to every agency across the state, whether it's the biggest state government agency down to a borough maybe the size of McDonald Borough where there's just a few hundred residents. And so it is something that we always keep in mind that even small agencies have to follow this law. So there are some changes in here to make it easier for agencies as well. But on balance, I think it's an excellent bill that will make a good law even better.
Well, it's one of those themes that we've been building on, at least in my short tenure here, is transparency.
Yes.
And your office is basically the beginning and the end of the transparency trail when people are filing these requests.
It's true. We're part of it. One of the very nice side effects that we've seen from this is the number of agencies who have proactively started posting a lot more information online, because it is much easier to say to a requester, hey, that information you want, it's already on our website, than it is to go to a filing cabinet, pull it out, sort through it, and all that sort of thing. So I think we're an important part of that process, but really the most important is what individual agencies do on a day-to-day basis.
Now, are there any things you guys are looking to change or any other adjustments you'd like to see in your office that maybe legislatively that we can do or maybe back home people can help out with?
Well, this year's, obviously the state as a whole has had an interesting budget situation this year, to put it mildly, but the Office of Open Records came through that with a very good budget number, so thank you very much for that. We are doing everything we can to make the process easier every day. We've updated our website once. We're in the process of an even bigger change to that to make it easier for people to use the right to know law. And there's nothing that we need right now, but things that I'm looking to do include a series of videos which will be available on YouTube explaining to people how to fill out a request, how to file an appeal, every step of the process. So it's an exciting time for government transparency, and I'm very much looking forward to what we're going to be able to do in the next year or two.
Yeah, it just seems like more and more people, they just want to know what's going on at the state government level. Even more so at the local level, a lot of people are starting to question certain expenditures. Are you doing this? Making sure that their tax dollars are spent appropriately.
That's exactly it. They want to make sure their tax dollars are being spent appropriately. Everybody knows that tax dollars are a scarce resource, and nobody wants to raise taxes. And it's something where the people are very much comforted when their government agencies are willing to share information. And more we're seeing people elected to office at the local level, at the state level, who believe in transparency as sort of a foundational principle. And I like to think anyway, the right to know law being passed in '08 helped play a role in that and changing the culture slowly in Pennsylvania.
Oh, I certainly agree with that. And I think that down the line it'll grow even further. Now, what's your grand vision for this office over the next, I think you have, 4 or 5 years left in your term?
I have a little less than 5 years left in my term. What I really want to do is focus more on the training aspect, focus more on the nuanced cases, really give my attorneys a chance to dig into the cases that present special challenges with in-camera review of records and with hearings. But really training. I want to get out across the state. We did 54 trainings last year. I'd like to do more than that this year. We're on track to do that. I'd like to really help to educate people, the requesters. It's easy to train agencies because you can get a group of agencies together very easily. Training requesters is a little harder because they're more dispersed. There's not an association of right to know requesters or something. Right. So I'd like to reach them more than we've been able to so far.
Now, I just want to touch one thing about your staff. Now, are the attorneys that you mentioned earlier, they're physically on staff, or are they kind of on contract?
Right now, everybody that we're using is on staff, in-house. We have one part-time, most are full-time. We do have the ability to use contract attorneys, and early on in the law's history, I think that was very useful. But what we've seen now is with so many cases coming through, so much case law being decided, that it's really hard for somebody who doesn't specialize in this area to just pick it up and roll with it. So we can farm out some of the easier cases, but those aren't particularly time-consuming, so it doesn't benefit us as much as it did earlier.
Yeah, and in being such a new agency too, over the period of time, you guys have fell into your groove and hit your sweet spot there.
It's amazing. January 1st of 2009 through today, we have issued almost 14,000 final determinations. Wow. And so, and then, the courts of common pleas have weighed in, the Commonwealth Court has weighed in, the Supreme Court has weighed in on many cases. So it has been a very active and growing body of law that sort of underlies the right to know law itself.
Well, that is good to hear. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Representative.
That's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Jason Ortitay. If you need any assistance with any state government matter, feel free to contact me at my local office. The address and number will be shown in just a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for Legislative Report.